afternoon, folks. This is Maggie Rose, and third hour being brought to you by the Microeffect Radio Broadcasting Network. And that was Carl Kling, folks. Yes, we want our country back. We want our freedoms and our rights restored. We want our dignity. Now, folks, today's, again, we're going to have the second part of a 3 to 4 part series and how we can take back our country and make America great again. Last week on Thursday, we were talking with David, who's the CEO and founder of America Again, Regaining Your Constitutional Power. And folks, I was just watching the news a little while ago. I don't know what's going on in Washington, D.C., and I certainly don't understand what's going on with these corporations. Boeing has just signed a contract with Iran. Yes, let me repeat that. Boeing, that does the aircraft, that builds the planes, just signed a deal with Iran to give them at least 100 planes for the total of $25 billion. So again, Boeing, I feel, has sold this country down the river for the green almighty dollar, and they are going to be building 100 planes for Iran to the tune of $25 billion, folks. But just so you understand that a lot of corporations in this country are selling us down the river, and a lot of this is happening starting in Washington, D.C., where we have our politicians who are abusing this country. They're abusing our Constitution. They're abusing the American people. And they forget that they are supposed to work for us. We are not under the Constitution. We're over the Constitution. And with America Again, folks, is it a positive way for us to take back our country? Instead of having talk show hosts coming up and screaming and yelling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, we want to bring talk show hosts up and people and listeners to say, let's find a positive way, hopefully a nonviolent way to bring this country back. And with America Again, this is a company, well, David will have to explain more about it, but America Again is a new way of life, and I quote, to stop Washington, D.C. running our lives. They recruit, train, support, and organize your community as we all work together, quote unquote, for restoring the constitutional republic of our founding fathers. Now, I went to this site. They have the solutions. They have the ingredients of what it takes. They have videos there. They have books that you can get a hold of, that you can read what is going on and how you can participate, starting with one community at a time. I have already watched the video, America Again. I watched the America Again, the movie, and the video of the solution, America Again. But we're going to bring David up now, and David's going to go into the second part of his presentation of how we can do this. David, thank you for coming on the show again.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for having me. Okay, last time we talked about our perilous financial situation, and that was created by Washington, D.C. organized crime and by a large and growing dependent class. So I'm not going to get back into that this time. We talked about sort of the bad news last time. Marxism has, it's never worked before and it won't work here now. We the people allowed Congress to be deep captured by predators in the criminal, monetary, credit, and banking system. And that's nothing but a huge casino. Nobody produces anything except a mountain of debt. They produce nothing, they make nothing productive for the country. So the whole world was forced to get in that game, by the way back in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. So the Fed cartel that was finally given its head because it wrote the law back in 1913. But well before that, in 1871, the Supreme Court jumped in the game. And before that, back in 1862, the 37th Congress, along with Lincoln, jumped in the game and actually started that counterfeiting. So that's how old this whole mess is.
So you're telling us that President Lincoln, the party to taking over our country, he actually participated in the takeover.
Lincoln, in Chapter 4 of my book, Fear the People, I expose Lincoln for the monster that he was. And every time, once you read any of the 6 books that I quote and have in that Chapter 4 of the book, Fear the People, I know this is hard to believe, people. I know you love Lincoln. I know you think he was the greatest president. Wrong. He was an absolute treacherous monster. If you read those books, you start learning from primary sources. You start learning American history for the first time in our lives. I was 39 years old when I learned that. When I learned the truth about Lincoln, and I couldn't believe it, so I had to keep digging and digging. Some of the books that I read were fairly recent that really, really put the last nails on Lincoln's coffin. He was a monster. Whenever I see the Lincoln Memorial, that huge, idolatrous, eerily lit temple to that monster, it turns my stomach. It's amazing. And we are like the old Soviet people. We're in a very hard time right now when Marxism is collapsing here after 100 years. It's collapsing finally. And we're understanding what really got us here, where the bodies are buried, who the liars were. So all this fraud and counterfeiting and stuff, it's all collapsing on itself now. But my word to you today, and my message to you last week, this week, Thursday, and next Tuesday is going to be the same thing. Guys, this is the best time to be alive in American history. I'm going to prove it to you here, and I prove it to you on our videos in my book. You've got to read, you've got to study, and you'll see the deal. Okay, by the way, there's a little book, a new little book by a guy named Charles Hugh Smith. Charles Hugh Smith. He's got several very good books. His latest one is fantastic. It's very small. It's called Why Our Status Quo Failed and Is Beyond Reform. I know it's a funny, title for a book and all that, but Charles Hugh Smith is a brilliant man. He's the best. He is the clearest teacher on economics I've ever seen, because if you're like me and you don't like reading economics stuff, you fly through this book. It is so cool. If you ever wanted a small, very simple little book that puts all the pieces together of not just this financial disaster, but how did the currency thing work? How did all of this come about, and why is it falling in so fast now on itself? He explains it all very, very simply. It's really cool. It's called Why Our Status Quo Failed and Is Beyond Reform by Charles Hugh Smith. Anything written by Charles Hugh Smith, I promise you'll enjoy it and you'll learn a ton from it. But this one, Why Our Status Quo Failed and Is Beyond Reform, is a must-read for anybody that wants to know what's coming, what has already passed, how this is happening, and how there's absolutely no way to restore it. Why it is absolutely must collapse. And he shows you. It's all written at about between middle school and junior high comprehension levels. It's simple. It's a simple book. Okay. Now, I want to do a thought experiment with you to kind of close our thinking here about Lincoln, because in my books, both of my books, Fear the People and the one before that, This Bloodless Liberty, my thesis essentially revolves around that man Lincoln. Not so much the man himself, but the 37 to 38 Congresses and that whole period, what happened in Washington, D.C., that it got taken over and that we got essentially we were hijacked at that point with that war. I call it the war to enslave the states. That's that's the most correct name to give that war. So I want to do a thought experiment here with your listeners, okay? Because I'm constantly amazed at the fear that everybody's gripped by fear, and they think the end of the world's just around the corner, and they think this every day. And I mean the end of the world, the end of the world. Look, if you don't know history, you're not going to realize we're watching the end of a very long Marxist period in American history. The end, not the beginning. We're seeing it kicking and screaming and dying, see? And you think that it's just being born. Wrong. You've got to know history. You've got to see how close Marx and Lincoln were. They were very close friends. They were bosom buddies. They were pen pals. Okay, for years I've tried to help my fellow constitutionalists grasp this most important event of all our history, and that was the Civil War. That was Lincoln's War, what I call the war to enslave the states. We cover it in the video that you watched, Maggie, America Again, the movie.
Right.
We cover it on that video, and it's on YouTube and on our website. All right, now try to imagine today that a war began, nationwide war, and it pitted half of us against the other half, with Washington, D.C., with a new Washington, D.C. army on one side.
Right.
And the other half of the country on the other side. Imagine, in 4 years, 7.5 million dead, and 50% of all property in this country destroyed in 4 years. Imagine that. Try to picture in your town, in my, between half of all our highways, power grid, bridges, water systems, infrastructure just destroyed beyond repair. Try to think about what that would be like. It would be
a total disaster.
That happened.
Already.
Do you understand, people, that that's what the Lincoln administration oversaw? If you read a book called A Century of War by John Denson, heavily footnoted, heavily documented book from primary sources, A Century of War by John Denson, you will never again you will know that Lincoln was so in the pocket of industrialists, and which industrialists owned him. If you want to know how ruthless and just breathtakingly lawless Lincoln was, he didn't care one whit for the Constitution. Read a book by Thomas D. Lorenzo called Lincoln Unmasked. And you're going to see how ruthless that man was, right in the face of the law. He didn't care. He didn't care. And again and again and again for 4 years he was doing it. If you want to see in great detail how Lincoln was a worse liar than both of the Clintons put together, read a book called Forced into Glory, written by a black historian, a great man, a really articulate, great black historian and author. His name is Lerone Bennett, Bennett. Forced into Glory. Incredible book. About 600 pages. It's a black man telling a black history about the truth about Lincoln, about how utterly, what an utter, he was a monster. Lincoln was a liar and a monster. And Lerone Bennett just absolutely nails it. So, I mean, you'll have Lincoln opened up for inspection every which way if you read those 6 books that I have in Chapter 4 of Fear of the People. I learned that we were so propagandized when we grew up. I mean, we learned lies in school.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now back to my point here. The precipitous mess that we're facing today, that we know is coming, it actually began all the way at the beginning with Alexander Hamilton, like I talked about last time, okay? It started way back then. We were transmogrified when Lincoln came on the scene, and we had that huge war that destroyed half the country and killed 750,000 people, which would be the equivalent of 7.5 million dead today. When you learn that this new massive U.S. Army put its boot heel down on the throat of all the former states, sovereign states, okay? This was a new federal power based in D.C. that stomped as hard on the northern states as it did on the southern. Until you grasp what happened to us in our heads, in all our heads, during those 4 years, you're not going to appreciate how why our character is so different today from how it was with the Founding Fathers. We're just not getting, man, how did this all happen? Well, you try killing 7.5 million Americans and burning and destroying half our country in 4 years. You just see if we're not freaked out and tamed, okay? So, people that think that things are so horrible today, try that happening to us, okay? That's how bad it's been. This is not the beginning of the bad stuff. This is the end of the bad stuff, guys. Yes, we're under the judgment of God today, okay? But the responsible, repentant remnant, we ought to be more encouraged and more emboldened today than ever. That's why I wrote Fear, to show you why you should be emboldened. Not cocky, I'm not talking about us thinking that we're great. We're not. We have a lot of work to do. But the field is wide open to us. It's wide open to us. We should be thanking God for His grace. Despite Him judging us as a people, He's still showing us a ton of grace.
Right.
So we have, we abide under the shadow of His wing. So America again is now beginning that, the work that has to get done. Okay, we put it off. We put it off for 5 generations. It's a long, but it's a very vital process. We have to rebuild these 150-year-old ruins that Lincoln and Marx left. Okay, and so don't be one of those Americans that says, oh, man, it's just a lost cause, and I don't know what to do, and I'm just so scared, and I'm so tired, and pal. I mean, come on. This is, there's 320 million of us. Most of us won't ever lift a finger. I realize that. But if half of 1% of us lifts a finger, that's 1.6 million people. Do you know what 1.6 million members in America again would do? It would totally turn the history of the world. Those little 1.6 million people, not many compared to the whole 320, but it's a lot of people when you have a tactical and strategic plan like ours.
Well, one of the questions that some of my people who have written to me have asked, they go on your website and they say for as little as $9 a month, they can join the membership. And what their concerns are, number one, there were 3 concerns they brought up. Number one, where does the money go? Number 2, does their name end up on a membership list that the cabal or the federal government or the IRS can get a hold of that membership list and then start attacking them like they did the Tea Party? And number 3, they have told me in emails that many times people in this country have wanted to close down the federal government because of the corruption, and they've tried to get the truckers, that truck our produce across the country, to go on strike for one day to show the federal government we're tired of their corruption, and yet we cannot get all the truckers to agree to turn off their truck and stop rolling for one day. So how are we going to get 1 to 3% of the U.S. population to understand how this works and to get off their computers and their cell phones and start to work as a team? How are we going to do that?
Okay, that's what we're doing right here. Okay, we're working through it right here. And it's not 1 to 3%, it's half of 1%.
Half
of 1% is all we need for the America Again indictment engine, which we're going to talk about next Tuesday. Well, I don't want to go through everything too fast, but here, what I want to get into today is, look, there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of anger all over this country.
And fear.
And a lot of fear. Fear. And all of that together turns into one thing. I saw it all my life because I grew up on the Mexico border on a ranch, literally a mile away from the Rio Grande River. And that it all turns into one thing called cynicism. And when you become a cynic, it's that kind of person who really won't lift a finger. You'll make jokes. You'll make dirty jokes. You'll cuss. You'll get very angry. Your face will turn red, and you'll do all kinds of things. But when it comes time to work, you just sit there. Now, I saw Mexicans do this all my life. And I love the people of Mexico. They're great. We have a lot of them working for us. We've had some in our family. I come from, half of our family comes from the Mexican people. I love, that's great. Great. I love the Mexican people. But they have a mindset that they essentially they've given up. They're cynics. They're born cynics and they die cynics. And now I see that here. Here, 50 years later, I'm watching it happen here, and I'm saying, no, this is not who we are. Now, what I'm saying is, I just want 1 out of every 200 people to say, you know what, everybody else in this room might say, screw it, I'm not going to do it. I'm saying, where do I sign up? If it's $9 a month, and you think, look, I sold a $400,000 house that was paid for. We sold both of our SUVs. We sold all of our silver. We gave everything we own, and I closed down my engineering practice, which was very lucrative and fun for me. And that's what I gave. Now I'm asking you to give $9 a month so we can pay the power bill, the internet hosting, a very few other bills, like sometimes the phone bill, We don't pay anything. Right now, we only have 110 members. It's very new, and it's only adding like literally one member a day. Try doing the math. I mean, we bring in $500 a month. My wife and I and our friends put in the rest. We're missionaries. So if you're going to gripe about $9 a month, I don't want to talk to you. Go somewhere else. Don't talk to me about how bad America is if you can't give $9 a month, when somebody else has put in everything they ever owned, everything we ever saved in our life. So that's that about that thing. Now, if you're afraid of people getting your information from our website or from us, let me just tell you, I did not fight with, but I crossed swords with IRS people for 20 years. I've been a law-abiding non-taxpayer. I think I mentioned this last time. For 20 years now, I have a website called taxhonestykrimmer.com where I show the names of the 14 agents of the IRS that I have gone against over the first 10 or so years. For about the last 8 or 9 years, they've left me alone. They haven't. I don't know where they went. But anyway, I give you their names, and I said, look, I sent them all home packing. I'm not afraid of them because I know the law, I obey it, and I make them obey it. It's simple. Now, if you don't want to do the work and you say, well, how does he get away with not paying his tax? I don't have taxes, not federal income tax. I've read the code. I see that I don't owe anything. There is no legal liability established for me in the code to keep records, file forms, or pay money to that organization. Sorry. I've done my due diligence. That's what I cover on that website, taxhonestykrimmer.com. I don't charge you a penny. I show you everything I've learned. And I say, look, now you go buy a copy of the code, mark it up. I even have another site called a tax code for all, and I show you every single line of the code that I highlighted. I mean, I do all the work for you, okay? And I don't charge you a penny. And I say, look, if you want to do what I do instead of crying about it, do it. Wake up, you idiot. Don't go cry about what I'm doing because I'm free and you're not. You need to wake up, wash yourself off, and man up. Now, for women, only half as many women do I talk that way to because most of the women that I know, at least the ones that are working with us, hustle about twice as hard as the men. That's what really ticks me off.
Right.
I see many, many more wimpy, limp-wristed men in this country today than women. It's weird.
Yeah,
anyway,
it is weird.
It's very strange. I mean, ever since I started talking to Tea Party groups before I gave up on that charade, I'd go talk to Tea Party groups. They were always run by women. All the leaders were women. They hustle. They make stuff. They do all, and they say, well, our husbands have to work and all. Yeah, I know. But you know what? This is really serious stuff. I've given up everything. When I was homeschooling our kid, when we homeschooled, I had to give up half my work and go do it till 4 a.m. because I was teaching the kids in the afternoon. You do what you got to do, folks. These are hard times. But as far as I'm concerned, it's still the best time in over a century. So here's what we're doing. America, again, is a perpetual charitable trust. Okay, it's not a company. It's a perpetual charitable trust. It's a member organization, and it's a new way of life for the repentant remnant. Okay, so it's meant to restore limited government and sound money and all of that by just enforcing the Constitution. We've never had anything like this before, folks. So, and we won't have this either if we don't get with it and get a bunch of people. So until we have tens of thousands of members, we won't make a blip on the radar.
Right.
Once we do have tens of thousands of members, especially with Donald Trump in the White House, we will make a huge, huge shot that will be heard around the world.
Now, we're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to be going to a station break here. Before we go to the station break, could you give out your website once again? And if you have a phone number that people can call, can you give that out? If not, just at least give out the website.
Yes, the website is americaagain.net. And if you click on Contact up at the top, it'll give you all of the emails for the different departments, all the volunteers that you can contact directly.
Okay, folks, this is David now. He's the founder and CEO of America Again. And we're going to be coming back on the other side of the hour here on the Micro Effect on the New Concord Hour with some more of the information that he wants to give us. We're also going to have him come back on Thursday for Part 3 and again next Tuesday for Part 4. And that will give us the beginning foundation of what we can do to work together as a team to take back America again, folks. Again, this is Maggie Rose with her guest, David, from America Again. David will be right back. Hold right on. Folks, this is Maggie Rose again, and this is the New Concord Hour, being brought to you proudly by the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting Network. We would like to say thank you to Bonnie, Evangel, Hardway 90909, Joe McNeil, and Liberty Riders that are in the chat room right now. Folks, the guest we have on today, this is Part 2, and it's David Zuniga. He is the CEO and co-founder of America Again. And as someone in the chat room just now said, David, they said that this is a great guest as solutions are what we are looking for now. So people are really excited. They're tuning back into you again, David. And we want to thank you again for coming back up on the Concord Hour again, and that you'll be back with us again this week and next week. Again, David, I think this is very positive, and that's what people are looking for right now, is a positive answer and how we can get back on board and get our country back on track. Because as you said, we've been off track now for over 150 years.
Yep, that's about it. And the really cool thing, I think, the thing that we ought to be just full of joy about is that God, for some reason, has not forsaken this land. And so you still, I noticed on the break, that gig from, I forget what movie it was, but where, the guy's talking about America not being the greatest country in the world anymore. For me and my family, still is. We get together with our house church group every weekend. Everybody homeschools in the group. A lot of us are law-abiding non-taxpayers. We're self-employed people. For us, there has never been greater freedom than we have in this country today. We fight for it and we work for it. And that's what it takes, folks. It still takes that here. And this is the only place on earth you can do this.
Well, until you get a letter from the IRS stating that they're going to go in because they believe you still owe $2,000 to $7,000, and they're going to start taking money out of your pension.
I totally get it. Look, like I say, I have a total other website that deals with that. I've dealt with them, for 10 years until they gave up on me about 10 years ago. But I've been, I don't even want to sidestep into the IRS issue because it is a big issue. I usually talk about that on April 15th somewhere, on some radio show somewhere in the country. Every April 15th I'm talking about it. But that's a small issue. I know for those of you who are still stuck, if you work for somebody else or if you take a pension check or if you whatever, I'm sorry. I understand that. But I'm just saying for many of us, for millions of us, that are doing the work to take ourselves out of the system, take our kids out of those government schools, leave those plastic pulpits behind, that kind of thing, not work in the cubicle for the big company with all the benefits. We do it the hard way, and we are finding more freedom than our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents ever had. So our mission at America Again is to move forward from here. Number one, bring Congress home forever. That's going to change everything. Number two, take back everything Washington, D.C. stole from us over the last more than 150 years. Get it all back. We have 22 laws to do that, reform laws. I cover that in Chapter 12 of my book, Fear of the People, which is available free on the website, americaagain.net. Number three, we provide a mechanism. We call it the America Again Indictment Engine, to enforce the Constitution for the first time in history and from now on. And then number four, working beside Oath Keepers and CSPOA and others, restore the local militia to the extent that people want to restore their local militia. Those that don't want to, I'm sure won't. But it's up to each of us. It's up to every community to say, you know what? Hell yeah, let's do this thing. Let's do this. It is time. Well, if you say that, you have to actually do it. You can't just sit around and whoop and holler and use your keyboard and think you're doing something. You're not. You've got to actually get to work. It's easy work. I mean, there's no ditch digging involved. But really, folks, it does take saying, okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm not going to wimp out anymore. I'm not going to be afraid of my servants. Even if they have guns, I'm not going to fear them. I'm going to stand up to them. That's what America Again is about. That's what the book Fear the People teaches you to do, from cover to cover. That's what I show you how to do that. It's not easy or fast, but it works. And it will work every time. So our first action, our first official nationwide action is to ratify the original First Amendment. That's what I want to talk about today. That amendment, the original First Amendment, it's still there in the Bill of Rights. Go look. The Bill of Rights is not articles. There are 12 articles on that piece of parchment. Look it up. Go to the U.S. Archives, the website of the U.S. Archives, or just on any search engine, just put Bill of Rights parchment and just click on it and go look. There's 12 articles, not 10. Now, what were those first two? The first one said that no congressional district could have more than 50,000 people. I mean, I'm paraphrasing terribly because it was 30,000, then 40,000, then 50. But at the end, it says no more than 50,000 people. Today, we have 750,000 and more in a district. They're huge districts. Okay? The Founding Fathers wanted to avoid that because they knew what was going to happen. Those huge campaigns and congressmen reigning over that many people, that's automatically going to, it's a corruption engine. That's all it's going to do. And you can't represent that many people. So, so if you look at the original Bill of Rights, you say, okay, why wasn't that one, why wasn't it passed? I have a whole appendix, I think it's Appendix G or H or something, very back of my book, Fear the People. It's called The Lost First Amendment. And I tell you the history of that amendment, why it was not it was not shown as having been ratified, even though it actually was in 1790. Anyway, that's just historical. Connecticut blew it. The Senate in Connecticut dragged its feet until 1790, and by the time it did, the House in the Connecticut House said, no, we want to take our vote back. Well, they couldn't, and so they sat there, and it just essentially sat in the archives in the state of Connecticut for 200 years. Anyway.
Oh, my goodness. So that was, and what year was that took place?
It took place in 1789 and 90. The House voted in 89, voted yes, and then the Senate, the Connecticut Senate voted in May of 1790, and so it should have right there. That was the 12th vote, and it should have been ratified, but they blew it. They didn't turn in their paperwork, and so it sat. And an attorney in New Jersey named Eugene Laverne, he went after this whole story. He said, wow, so we really do have small districts. We need to force this. So he took it to the courts, and he went through the federal, the district courts, and he went up to the appellate level, and they said correctly, look, we're not a part of this. There's nothing about the courts in Article 5. The courts can't get involved and say, oh, tomorrow we're going to have 6,400 districts. We can't do that. We don't have so the courts don't have the jurisdiction. So the appellate court was correct in telling Mr. Laverne, hey, look, take it back the political route, man. Go get the states to do it.
Now we have on that issue, we have, I understand, David, Art in Arizona that's calling in with a question. Art, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, do you have a question for Mr. Zuniga?
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have sworn in my history class that all the states, as they signed on, to the U.S. Constitution, that the first 10 amendments were written into perpetuity, thus creating that the First Amendment and the rest of them have been ratified by all 50 states.
Yes. Those 10, the last 10 of those 12 amendments have been ratified, yes. The first two were not fully ratified, or so they said. As I just told you, the first one actually was, but it wasn't properly recorded by the state of Connecticut when they had their vote in 1790, and so it slipped between the floorboards and sat there for a long time. Now, what happened in the case of the original Second Amendment, which is now our 27th Amendment, when it was ratified 204 years later, is another guy from Texas. He was a University of Texas student named Gregory Watson, and he had an idea that he was going to go and get the original Second Amendment finally ratified. It said that Congress could not give itself a pay raise until an election shall have intervened. So, and that made sense. You know, they can't give themselves, if they want to give themselves a pay raise, they have to propose it and then let an election happen and see how many of them lose their jobs. so it was a good idea, and so this guy Watson, this student, took this thing and ran it through 41. I think there were only 9 that had ratified back in 1790 on that one, and he went and got it done. It took him 10 years to do it, but he actually got that one ratified by enough states. By 1992, I believe, is when he finished that project. And so 11 of the 12 rights in our Bill of Rights have now been ratified. But the original first right in our Bill of Rights has not. And that's the most important one. It was the only issue upon which George Washington stood up to speak publicly about in the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Washington did not ever speak in plenary session until the last day of the convention. Nathaniel Gorham had this thing, and he said, look, Article 1, Section 2, we're talking about 40,000 people, 40,000. It's too many. It's too big. And he got President Washington to stand up and say, you know what? It is too big. It should be 1 to 30,000. And he suggested that the convention go ahead and amend that before they left, and they did. Unanimously voted to bring it down to 1 to 30,000 so that the districts would not be too large. It was that important to them. That's why it's the original First Amendment. So our original first right in the Bill of Rights has been sitting there, open for ratification, under Article 5 for 227 years. It's still open for ratification. You don't have to have a con or any of that. It's there. It's open. It's the original First Amendment. So there's no time limit on it. We found that out in 1992 when, the 27th of the original First Amendment became the 27th, 203 years later. So there are 39 state legislatures that haven't voted to ratify. We're going to say arguably 39 because we're going to say, okay, Connecticut, you blew it in 1790. We're throwing it back to you. You got to vote again. So really there's 39 state legislatures that this has to run by. We only need 27 of those to ratify it. So say Connecticut is too liberal now. Say California is going to be too liberal. Pick whichever ones you want. We only need 27 out of the 39 that are left. And we will have our 28th Amendment, and we will have apportioned representation at last. And we will have what George Washington said we absolutely needed to have. And that's going to force Congress out of D.C. forever. Because when that amendment's finally ratified, and districts are only 50,000 people, we've got 320 million Americans today, that means 6,400 congressmen. Now, they could never fit in the Capitol building. That's fancier than most royal palaces in the world, with its gilded dining rooms and gold-plated china and all that crap. They shouldn't have any of that anyway.
Art, did you have another question?
Yeah, that was my second question. Has he ever been to D.C.?
Oh, yeah, certainly have. And on the next hour, Thursday, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about things like the whole aura of the city and especially monumental architecture and what that does to you when you visit. I'm an architectural engineer by profession.
I wasn't impressed.
I'm sorry?
It didn't do anything to me. I wasn't impressed.
You weren't impressed? Well, good for you. You've got a brain in your head, I guess. I didn't when I first went, but I've been enough times that now I'm extremely repulsed when I go into when I enter that city. But
Oh, yeah.
When we take them out of
they should play the Twilight Zone music wherever you go in that city, because it's so far out of touch with the rest of it, it's unreal.
Right. So taking Congress out of that city is not a new idea. It was first proposed in 2013. Two guys, a Democrat named Eric Swalwell from California and a Republican named Steve Pierce from New Mexico. Those two guys floated a resolution. They called it the Mobile Act. It was killed right away, but back in 2013, and of course, out of it was, since they were both Westerners, they didn't want to have to travel so far every weekend, to go home and all that. And they wanted to save, all kinds of expenses. But our Bring Congress Home Act, it's the first of 22 reform acts that we're proposing, that America Against proposing, that I cover in Chapter 12 of the book, Fear of the People. The book is available, again, as a free download on our website. Scroll to the bottom of the homepage at americaagain.net, and on the bottom right it says PDF book. Click on that. You can download the book for free. All of the links in the book.
One last question. If you've been to D.C., you should know, like I have, that if you would approach D.C. and try to force them into leaving D.C., they can turn around and make a law at will overnight in the wee hours saying they don't have to leave D.C.
No, actually, I won't argue the point with you here, but that's a preposterous suggestion. And no, they can't. And no, it wouldn't pass. But, so again, thank you very much for calling in. I just, I need to try to finish today. But when our law currently, the law that's out there under Article 5, open for ratification, stipulates that there would be no more than 50,000 people in the district. Washington, D.C. cannot touch that. They already passed it. The first U.S. Congress passed it. Okay, Art? So they can't do a thing about it. All right? They've already taken action and sent it to the states. They cannot untake that action, Art. So that is the original First Amendment. It sits open under Article 5 of the Constitution. It is up to the states alone, and that means the people alone, to say, yes, we do, or no, we don't want small districts. If we say, yes, we do want small districts, it doesn't matter what Washington, D.C. says. And no, they can't pass a law tomorrow rescinding it. Sorry. This is the U.S. Constitution. They've already taken their action.
Bonnie was saying that she saw D.C. as a foreign country or a foreign land. Would you consider that they are a foreign entity?
Yes. Yes. Right. It operates precisely like Vatican City does. It operates precisely like Monaco does. It operates precisely like the UN does. It is a foreign city-state operating against the interests and predating on, as a predator on, the American states, the 50 states. Yes. I agree with Bonnie entirely. And when you start understanding that that's how it operates, and in my book I explain to you how it actually does that. Once you start seeing that, let me give you one example. Lockheed, the 800-pound gorilla in the war industry. Lockheed Martin used to be just Lockheed. They got together with Martin Marietta and created this monster called Lockheed Martin. They're the biggest boy on the block as far as the war industry. Its new generation project, fighter jet project, the F-35, it's been a typical boondoggle, like all the others have, except, number one, it wasn't needed in the first place. The F-22 Raptor was already way over-designed for anything else the world had to offer, that Russia or China or anybody else could come up with. The F-35 is plagued with problems, systems problems, cost overruns. It's going to run 10 years over its promised delivery date. Now, any of those things should kill that kind of a project. You know what? It'll never kill the F-35. Why? Because Lockheed Martin has subcontractors for that one aircraft. It has subcontractors and suppliers in 46 states, 350 U.S. congressional districts. See how that works? Can you imagine anybody killing that? It's an untouchable project. That pork barrel has 350 U.S. congressional districts. Now watch how we're going to work this. Watch how we have to be smarter than them, or we're never going to beat them. When we go back and take George Washington at his word, and we go back and get our original First Amendment, we will have districts that are 1/15 the size they are today, right? That's very cool. That means we all know our representative. We live very close to them and all that. But here's the cool thing. Immediately, that creates 14 new members of the U.S. House for every existing one. And that's if the existing ones could even win re-election, which in these new tiny districts, I guarantee you most of them are going to say, I'm not going to run for that district. I'm used to being king over all this. I don't want that. I'm leaving. But whatever, it's going to be 14-1 immediately. Do you see? So that if you're an existing Lockheed Martin or anybody, any Boeing, anybody, any big organized crime operator, you're going to have 14 new guys against your one guy. See? Right away.
Yeah.
So it's 15 times harder to maintain your racket. And let me tell you, because they're not, DC organized crime has the, everybody like fish in a barrel over there on Capitol Hill, right? And right down the street from K Street, where all the law firms draft all of our federal laws for industry. So industry drafts their laws that they want. They get their boys on Capitol Hill. They go buy their people to go front the law and say, oh, yeah, I'm sponsoring it. Yeah, but who wrote it? Oh, well, Merck, whoever, one of the big pharma companies or one of the, Monsanto wrote the law. Yeah, well, Monsanto wrote it. When we've got 15 times more people in the House and they're living amongst their people, and it's people like you and me that are sitting in those offices, we're going to say, go to hell, Monsanto, Boeing, Lockheed, whoever. We're killing this deal. This is ridiculous. See how that works? We take it back. We take our country back by first taking Congress out of that city-state, and it's just like eviscerating it. We take the guts out of that independent, lawless, tyrannical city-state.
Well, then how do we also, being that we all know that the crown, being the British crown, England, basically has some control over us today. We never even got completely rid of them in the war in 1812. How can we make sure we cut loose the ties where the British monarchy and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have control as well?
Well, a lot of people come up with what I just kind of generally put them all together into one barrel that I call esoteric law. Here's what I think about esoteric law. Law that nobody knows, but it must exist, and some very powerful people really own us, but we don't know that we're owned, and we're not sure how to get out. Look, here's how you get out. We say, you know what? We do not recognize any such contract. We do not recognize any such owner, and I am not. Goodbye. And I own Congress now. Now, when we have 6,400 members of the U.S. House, and most of them are us, see, Maggie, the whole thing is we have to do this thing. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
We have to actually do it. My next book is called The Statesman's Manual. If you look in the back of my current latest book, Fear of the People, and I'm not an author, and I don't want to be an author. I'm falling forward into whatever we need. I'm going to do it if I can't find somebody else that already did it. So we need a book, a simple book that is like the only book right now that shows you how to write federal law is called Legislative Drafting Step by Step by Arthur J. Reinerson, and he's worked for the Senate Legislative Committee for 25 years. He writes laws that Lockheed and others, bring in the door. They say, hey, here, make it a law. So I'm writing a book called The Statesman's Manual. And the subtitle, let me see what the subtitle is. Can't remember offhand. It's A Citizen Statesman's Guide to Writing and Enacting Federal Legislation Conforming to the Constitution and Supporting the Rule of Law. And it's going to be a simple guide. I'm copying a lot from Art, from his book, with attribution. I'm giving him full credit. Showing you how you write federal law. It's not as hard as you think it is to write a federal law. So we're going to all learn together how to write federal laws, how to pass them together, and we're going to take control over our own future and the future of our kids and grandkids. We're not going to allow this to go anymore. We're just going to say, hell no, we are now going to sit in the U.S. House. I'm running for my office here.
Right.
I've only got 50,000 people to represent. I can do this. And there's millions of us, Maggie,
right.
millions of Americans are going to say this. Wait a minute. Watch. Here's our Bring Congress Home Act. Let me tell you what the provisions of it are.
Yes. Well, we're going to have to go into that on Thursday, where it's the hour, yes. One quick question, David, before we go. Do you think Britain will leave the EU on Thursday? And that was being asked by Evangel.
Yeah, Brexit. You know, I'm not sure that it matters. It's very hard to tell what Brexit's going to do. I think that it will not matter in any case because the Eurozone is a basket case. Right. And it's only a matter of how much Germany is going to, how much of the load Germany is going to have to pull. I don't think it's going to matter. I personally don't think they're going to pull out. Well, folks, this is David Zuniga, and this is the America Again. He's talking about how we can bring back our country. We're going to be back on Thursday with part 3 with David. David, thank you very much. Your website again is www.americaagain.net. And folks, we'll be coming back with part 3 of 4 parts. And you can also, if you haven't been able to listen to it today or your friends or family weren't able to, Bonnie Clay is going to be putting this up on YouTube, folks. So again, David, thank you, and we'll see you again on Thursday. Thanks, Maggie. Thank you so much. Folks, this is Maggie Rose. This is with David Zuniga, America Again. This is a new Concord Hour with the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting Network. We'll be back with you for part 3 on Thursday. God bless and good night.